Our next panel is going to be talking about the imperativeness for Canada to become more competitive, and that is through accelerating AI adoption. From what we learned in that conversation, it's important to understand that planning and talk is just a start. You then need leadership to carry through with action. And so this next panel has some of the best leaders and action takers that we have here in Canada and within Vector. Our Vector team is blessed to be able to work with them and support their activities. So I turn it over to one of our big action takers and our captains, Cameron Schuler.
Thank you very much, Warren. I do want to thank all of you for coming today. We know this is a whole day you're spending with us. We hope you find it very worthwhile, and we're always grateful to spend time with our partners. So we do have a full house, but there are actually thousands of people online from 20 or so countries. So we're incredibly grateful for that, and we welcome them as well. So if you take a look at what's happening today, clearly AI is becoming more popular versus less popular. It's certainly impacting us in all sorts of ways, and it's fairly transparent. And while the global race to secure AI talent is a thing, Canada really does stand at the forefront of that revolution. And our strategic advantage is a thriving AI ecosystem that already delivers results. Look no further than Canada's 5 big banks, all of which were founding sponsors of Vector, which we are grateful for. They also rank at the very top of the global AI banking index in terms of adoption and innovation. I'm proud to say that all 32 Vector Enterprise sponsors are seizing the AI opportunities. In addition to that, so are the 200+ startups, scale-ups, and fast-lane companies that we work with. But the drive within the ecosystem coexists with the need for more rapid and widespread AI adoption by Canadian industry. So during the panel, we will dive into this, but before that, I would actually like to take a moment and welcome Vector's newest gold sponsor, Unilever, Unilever Canada, and the Horizon 3 AI lab based here in Toronto. We couldn't be happier with this, and we're very grateful for you joining us, so thank you very much. So if you take a look at what their goals are, it really is going to be the partnership is to support Unilever's mission to drive AI adoption at scale to deliver operational excellence. So there's no better person to tell you about this than one of our panel members, Steve McCrystal, who is Unilever's Chief Enterprise Technology Officer. Based in the UK, Steve leads digital transformation across the global business and was instrumental in bringing the Vector and Unilever teams together. So please welcome to this moment for Steve to come up on the stage and say a few words. Thanks, Steve.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Actually, it's a pleasure for us to join this esteemed group. And I was thinking about it this morning. I did just fly in last night from the UK. I landed this morning, and I talked to my wife. She's a little bit later in the day for her. And I said, I can't believe my timing. I'm going to come in and talk about the criticality of collaboration just a few days after my home country has made some interesting choices. So not thrilled at my timing of it, but honestly, when I think about how Unilever looks at the opportunity in front of us, we are all in on AI and the disruptive potential of it, and that's a very positive potential, but equally there's some challenges to that potential as well too. So we think about it in both ways. Our view is that collaboration will be the way through that. We need to collaborate in talent, we need to collaborate diversely, and I think that's where innovation really comes from. It's also critical, and I think I may be right, though it can be fact-checked, that we may be one of the first FMCG or CPG companies joining Vector, which is fantastic. Fantastic because we have a fundamental belief that we need to stay 3 steps ahead. And that's one of the things we'll look to gain from this partnership here. I have a number of Unilever colleagues here with me. Pleased to have Gary Wade here with us, who's the president of Unilever Canada as well. And why does that matter? It matters because everything that we do has to fundamentally have positive business impact. So we will always be focusing on the biggest things, the biggest challenges our company faces, how we generate demand, how we fulfill that demand, how do we thinking about being more productive, how do we bring insights in to create new spaces for our business to grow. So everything has to be grounded in actually delivering those business outcomes. And that's what we hope to bring to this community here. Our focus on business outcomes, your focus on technology and innovation, and we think those two things coming together can make a real difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Stay up here.
Stay up here? Yep.
Yeah, so let me take that seat, please. Thank you very much, Steve. Call me biased, but my experience has been our partners do tend to be leaders in the field, and that's actually why they joined Vector. So now to our next panel. As mentioned earlier, we have a lot to discuss and a lot to learn in a short period of time, so I will keep this as brief as possible. So our two other panelists are Dr. Foteini Agrafioti and Sabrina Geremia. So Foteini, who many of you know, is SVP Data and AI and Chief Science Officer at RBC. Foteini and I have actually worked together for about 10 years. We've known each other for a while, and we're grateful for the support. And she's responsible for the data and AI ecosystem at RBC and has helped evolve the bank into a leading global AI innovator. Sabrina is VP and Country Manager for Google. Google was also one of our founding sponsors. We're grateful for that too. And Sabrina leads the strategic direction of Google's cross-functional business teams, including its ad business and the relationships to the local innovation ecosystem, as well as relationships to the C-suite of Canada's largest corporations. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. I will go sit down now and we'll get on with it. Thank you. All good. All good. So I'm going to add a little bit of context as to what we're speaking about today. So as you can probably see on the screen, this really is about accelerating AI adoption. So a bit of context for this. So Canada leads in AI research. As Tony said, Rich Sutton won the Turing Award, Jeff Hinton's won a Nobel Prize. We kind of say that kind of like, yeah, these things happen, but they're really, really rare. But the Canadian Chamber of Commerce actually put out a report in May 2024 that almost 3 in 4 Canadian businesses, 73%, have not even considered using generative AI yet. So I personally find that a little concerning. So today we're going to discuss what are the most critical barriers preventing Canadian companies from implementing AI solutions, and how can Canadian companies compete more effectively. So first I'm going to go to Sabrina. So from Google's perspective, what unique advantages can Canadian companies leverage while competing with global counterparts?
Well, thank you, and hi, everybody. It's really lovely to be here, and that was a really great discussion this morning. You know, so we are leaders in AI primary research development. You saw this. I've worked with Nobel Peace Prize winners. You can't normally say that, right? Jeff Hinton, the Turing Award, et cetera. And we've done such a great job at that. And what I'd love for us to do as a country is become leaders in adoption. And you mentioned earlier that I think we're lagging in some areas in adoption. And I think it's a really important thing that we need to do as a country, because these technologies are advancing to be helpful to individuals, to be helpful to workers, and also to unlock productivity. So, the numbers are pretty clear. There's from Gen AI, about 230 billion of economic impact for the Canadian economy, for everybody in this room and beyond. There's about 3 weeks, it's like 175 hours per worker that you can get back to actually use that. So the cost of not getting that advantage or unlocking it for us is going to be high. And I think when I look at what are the barriers and what are the opportunities that are sort of intertwined, I mean, the first thing is that as a nation, we need to pivot to bold value creation, but we also need to pivot to opportunity while mitigating the risk, right? We talked in that earlier conversation, yes, there is risk to mitigate, and there are ways to do this, but we really need to be focused also on the opportunity. We have to unlock it for SMBs. That's the backbone of our economy. They've got to use it. They've got to start to actually put it in their hands. So we did some research that when you use it, you are way more optimistic about it, and you actually see a lot of opportunities on this. And then larger companies too, they have opportunities. I'm sure you'll talk about this, but unlocking it at scale, really having it across the entire organization, not falling into pilot paralysis, and being able to share how the value is being created. So I think there's so much potential for us to go from champions in research and development to champions in actually unlocking the value and the productivity.
Thank you. And then you mentioned it earlier, obviously the risk of not doing it really is failure, I think is quite clear. So Foteini, next to you. So RBC operates in roughly 30 different countries. So obviously lots of moving pieces. So how are you dealing with the adoption across the organization? Or the adoption of AI?
So we're quite excited. We've been early movers, I want to believe, in the space of AI across the banking industry. And we did so because we really recognized that this is the type of technology that it really is a platform enablement across every banking decision we make, across all of our business lines and products and services. And so looking back in our history, we used to use our data to make decisions, whether we're detecting fraud or assessing risk or pricing products or personalizing a digital relationship. Doing so with state-of-the-art AI was very natural for us. And we went exactly through the journey of adopt it, bring some experts in, go through use cases, get better at selecting the use cases because you're learning how to focus better, and then maturing. And right now I feel like we're on the definitely on the other side of the experimentation where AI has come out of the lab. It's CEO driven. We now focus we write business strategy starting with AI. And so it's not a technology push anymore at the Royal Bank. It's more of a business pull. It's kind of like it's a key enabler. I cannot operate. I cannot meet my business goals unless I have that. And that's the big transition that has happened in the last few years. And frankly, none of that would have been possible without understanding this technology very deeply. And I can only assume why is it that I don't have the data about Canadian businesses and what really is happening there, but I would say off the bat, Gen AI brought a lot of attention to AI. And if you go from nothing to Gen AI, I think it's a big leap. You gotta go through the journey of first digitization. You gotta really be digitally savvy business. And I don't know that all of our businesses think this way. And then you gotta invest in your data and your infrastructure and make sure you're organized around that and value that as a competitive moat. And then use some AI that is probably not generative AI to begin with, to start connecting that to your bottom line and understanding how you can save on your costs, how you can create new revenue streams from the data. And then I think that it comes more naturally that you would embrace Gen AI technology as well. I think the leap from nothing to Gen AI is probably a big jump for a lot of the businesses. So it's a journey. Just because science moved so quickly, it doesn't mean that industry can just overnight adapt as well, no matter how much of a low-code, no-code opportunities there are for anybody to take it on. It's also a matter of, do I want to have Gen AI enabled relationships with my clients? Right? And for most businesses, I suppose, to answer this question it's more fundamental about what is that going to change for how consumers will interact with my business. Are they ready? Do they want it? Is there risk in it? And you really got to understand it before you can adopt it. And I would say that's another area where we felt that made a difference in our journey as a bank, was that we never saw AI as a black box because we had experts in-house, a lot of them from Vector, and thanks to the institutes and the pool of really amazing scientists that existed in Canada that came into our ranks and really helped bring these innovations that would otherwise not come from the financial industry, quickly adapt them into our domains, but also understand them so we don't treat them as black boxes, right? Because these are very sensitive environments together with many other industries, and just plugging and play is not an option for us. Turning on an AI off of cloud is not an option for us. So we really got to have the expertise in-house to understand how these machines are trained, what kind of data, what can go wrong, where's the devil in the details, and that gives you comfort, and that's what I think in the end opens up that door to embrace it more holistically in an enterprise.
Thank you, Foteini. Before I ask Steve the next question, I have a question for the audience. What is Canada good at? That's always the number one. This isn't a trick question. Why are you here? Right? It's AI as well. We're good at many, many things. We were the third country to put a satellite into orbit. Ultimately, as Canadians, we're not comfortable bragging about what we do, but we are excellent at many things. And in fact, the Canadian banks are top 25 globally in terms of AI adoption, and RBC is number 3. So we start thinking about how we win as Canadians, it's because we have an ecosystem, and every partner has been building that with us. So now back to Steve. So Steve, you have AI initiatives around the globe. Yet you chose to establish Horizon 3 AI Lab here in Toronto. How come?
It's a good question, actually. And it's funny because we got on this journey three years ago or so. And the team brought it to me, and we do a lot of work in China, obviously because of the nature of our company, and obviously on the west coast of the US. We spend a lot of time with key partners there, like Google's a good example. And the team came to me and said, we want to create this Horizon 3 lab, and that's a very important and intentional phrasing, this Horizon 3 lab, because it's really about us thinking about, the next step beyond where we are today. We've been playing in traditional AI for 10 to 15 years, candidly. Millions of machine learning models across our business today. You can't be a massive FMCG company and not have that thinking in the core of your DNA. And the team brought to me this idea of Toronto. I said, Toronto, why Toronto? And it took a little time for me, to be honest, until I got into it and understood the ecosystem a little bit, and really became super impressed, because what we are trying to do here is think about what's next for us. And so fundamentally, we believed if we can create the right ecosystem where we can get academia engaged in some of the phenomenal work coming out of University of Toronto, or government engagement, cross-industry engagement, and we just felt like this is a place where we could actually grow and get talent. And that was crucial for us, because at the end of the day, if we're going to really push the envelope on this, it is all about how we attract and get the the right talent here, and that's a core for us, thinking about talent strategy, and not just on the team. We've got really deep data science experience, so I feel really proud of that. But I think it's grounding it in the business problems, creating playgrounds for business folks to engage with AI technology. That's what's making us better, because it's actually really upskilling the entirety of the organization, which is quite critical.
Thank you. So I'm now going to go back to Foteini. And so if you think about the AI implementation that you've been doing, what are key lessons that you've learned that might be applicable to other companies that are in attendance today or listening online?
Many. Many. It sounds like AI is the type of thing that solves any problem. And once you actually get at it, it clearly is not. It's always part of a solution. And there's so many things you learn along the way. If I kind of look at the top reasons why things don't work, I would say number one is there's some assumption about what data can or cannot do. But the moment you start actually testing, you may realize that you don't have the right type of data to solve the problem you need, or you don't have it in the format. It's not as clean, as organized as you need it to be, so you got to go solve something more fundamental first. So I would say never ever jumping into an AI investment all in. Test up front, validate your hypothesis. We learned that in a hard way many times. Second is make sure we're aligning between technology and business on the type of change management that is necessary for an AI to be successful. Like the number of times that we have seen AIs, really good AIs, deployed, and the things that could have never been anticipated about in business practice that overrides the AI, but you only start measuring the result, and you're like, something's off, and what's going on? Why is it not performing the way you want it? And you realize that, oh, there's a business practice in place that doesn't accommodate for that AI. And so thinking critically upfront about like what else needs to change in how you operate is very important. And sometimes these are very challenging things to do, especially in the banking industry. Like we ran a bank for 100 years, and there's a certain way that we operate, and so how we manage risk and fraud and price our products is very specific. But it's the other half of that equation for sure. And I would say the last part is don't treat them again like a black box. I can never put enough emphasis on this one. It is imperative that we understand what's going on inside AIs, especially as we live in a world where they have been turned on into every third-party system that you may or may not be using in your company. But very naturally, these AIs have been integrated in platforms that weren't originally meant for AI or machine learning. And it's very easy to start introducing this into your workflows without understanding what the implication of that is. So we're very mindful of this is not just anymore an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem of like many different players, and there's risk that can be introduced from many sides of this, and we manage very carefully our way through that.
Thank you, Foteini. So Sabrina, you approach this from a different side because we have both Foteini and Steve who are working inside their organizations, but you actually work with companies. So if you start thinking about common patterns that you've seen on the successful side, but also those that struggle, how would you actually speak about that in terms of success and some of the challenges you see?
Yeah, I identified with a lot of what you said, Foteini. I think what you said there about like the change leadership, I kind of think of it a bit as a recipe, right? Like if it were a recipe, it would be a quarter cup of tech and 3/4 cup of change, really, because and we really focus a lot about talking about the tech, and we don't realize that as we're actually bringing in these new technologies, workflows, processes, the edges of jobs may need to evolve, and so there is, I think, a big opportunity for us to focus on that. So I spend a lot of my time working with these wonderful companies on stage and a lot of the larger companies in Canada. And then I spend a lot of time with startups and, smaller companies to understand too, because it's bringing the whole economy up on this. And the pattern I've noticed, I call it the ABCs of AI adoption of what works well. And this is like large company focus, but I'll put an SMB top spin on it as well. The A is basically, it's all teams and definitely always learning. Like the always learning is everyone. This is evolving. You have to constantly keep up to speed on this. And on the all teams, like I think there was like a couple of years ago where it felt like the CTO and the CIO owned it, right? And when it's stuck there, you're not going to be able to drive the change because you're not partnering with the CMO, you're not partnering with the CHRO, you're not partnering with other parts of the organization and large ones. So all teams. The second for B is about your goals, and they need to be bold. So really bold goals, and they need to be bold goals anchored on value creation. And I can't understand that enough because guess what? AI produces a ton of data. And just because you measure it doesn't mean that you need to manage it. And if you get stuck in this paralysis of all of the little details in it, you're going to miss the point about on the other end of the transformation you're driving, are you actually creating value creation, bold goals? So that's a really important one. And then the 3 goes back to culture, right? It's culture and change. Like this is changes in ways of working. There needs to be a culture of innovation, a culture of understanding how to drive transformation. I think you need to role model it. At the moment, like I'm trying to have a little more fun with it. Like I'm trying to find folks in the organizations, they're coming to me and showing the stuff that they're doing on their own, and I have been blown away. So there have been people who don't code at all coming to me and showing me these really sophisticated tools that they're building because they actually use Gemini Code Assist to learn how to do this. And by the way, this Code Assist is available to anyone. We've had startups in Vancouver that have taken their coding from 8 hours down to an hour, and the majority of developers in Canada are using it. Actually, Google has 25% of its code that's Gemini code developed. So these are like amazing, transformative tools, and giving that culture of we want you to use it, we want you to learn it, we have to put the right guardrails in place is really important.
Well, thank you for that. A couple things you said that I think are wonderful. Well, everything you said was wonderful, just to be clear. But a couple things you said I think really resonate. So we've been saying AI is a team sport for a long time, right? You need to get all your people involved in it. They need to help you shape it as an organization. Another thing was when Notebook LM came out, you actually did a post. And we use it inside of Vector. It's been a fantastic tool in terms of productivity and in terms of accuracy and things like that. So that was great. And then on to the 25% of all code written at Google is written by AI. To give that sort of context, you have about 180,000 employees and about 40% of those write code. So when people start saying, what's the ROI on this? Just do the math. It's going to be a really big number. And it's going to be in terms of quality and in terms of speed. So those are really changing. So thank you for those points. Now back to Steve. So you've implemented over 500 AI models globally and trained 23,000 employees in AI usage, which I think is a drop in the bucket, though. But obviously, you're doing some great things. So what key lessons have you learned about accelerating enterprise-wide AI adoption at scale, and particularly balancing the technical implementation with the human and organizational elements of that?
Super. It's a very good question. And as you would expect, 500 AI capabilities, 20,000 people, it's the speed of AI, right? Those are so outdated numbers already. So, but literally that's what we had even just a few months ago to talk about. And there's a few things that I want to comment on, maybe building a little bit on the comments that were made, because I had an interesting conversation with the chief operating officer of one of the preeminent large language model developer, let's say, and they were talking about the challenge they have internally in their company in leveraging AI tooling. And they said actually 50% of the employees really engage with the capabilities. When you watch them work, the fluidity is unbelievable. And the other 50% aren't really using the tools the way they were envisioned to be used. And this was literally at one of the preeminent companies. And I was just like, you're struggling to get people to use AI? How is that possible? Surely you guys must be brilliant at that, right? But I think there's important lessons to be learned in that story alone, which is that it's not necessarily about the technology. I think sometimes it's the non-obvious skills. It is the adaptability to change and thinking about resilience and being comfortable trying these things out that can make a real difference. I haven't coded in quite some time. Well, actually, that's not true. I did 2 weeks ago. I built my own app using a tool called Cursor because I wanted to try these capabilities and see what it was like. 30 minutes after one YouTube video, thanks for the YouTube video, 30 minutes, and I built an app that's interrogating my wine cellar at home, which is just super bizarre. And it's actually pretty cool. So I try to kind of guide people a little bit that it can be really intimidating at first, but it really is not that intimidating. Now, just on the point of how do we kind of drive and think about scale a little bit, I'm going to go back to a comment I made in the opening part, which is the criticality of kind of thinking about business impact. We had and I think, kind of a CEO agenda about maybe not even a year ago, about 9 months ago, we had planned for our leadership team to go out to Silicon Valley and spend some time with all the biggest tech companies. And in advance of that, we just said we'd really had to appreciate what is it that we're trying to solve. And if we don't make it about what we're trying to solve, what's the point of taking the trip, actually? And so we looked at it in kind of 3 spaces. One space is, are we going to be able to use new capabilities to help us generate demand? And that is, how do we think about R&D and creating more efficacious products or more capable products? Or how do we then engage with our consumer community? The world is moving towards social first. How do we do that at scale? That's critical for us to move away from being mass to being more social first. Influencers demand a huge amount more content from us. How do we reimagine the digital content supply chain that we need? And then then thirdly, as it relates to generating demand, so much of what we do is sold through big retailers. And so if we can't figure out how to fulfill their demand, leveraging the AI models properly, we'll be left behind. So demand generation became a theme for us. And then, of course, there was a second theme, which was, hey, it's an inflationary world. We feel that pain like many others. What can we do to drive productivity? We spend $20 billion plus on buying raw pack materials. How can we be smarter than the rest in doing that? And that demands huge amounts of insight, huge amounts of data, and leadership thinking from a group like the Horizon 3 labs that we have, coupled with our business partners in the Unilever community to try to drive that. We're also one of the bigger manufacturers on the planet. So how do we think about the physical usage of AI in terms of making our manufacturing sites more dark, as we would say? And that's two big, huge challenges for us. How do we get changeovers to happen efficiently? And how do we get raw material into the manufacturing site? Not easy use cases from a physical AI point of view. But if you don't ground it in the key business values, key business challenges, you won't draw the teams in. And I think by doing that and stating these are the core things as a company we stand for to drive demand generation, demand fulfillment, and productivity, we're bringing everybody along with us. So the 23,000 is in a way a drop in the bucket because there's really not many who haven't touched it in some way, at least in our ecosystem.
Thank you for that. Now, you asked earlier when you were giving your remarks about joining Vector if you're the only, and I'm going to call you a CPG company, and then you're going to correct me.
Oh, that's okay.
So you are the first CPG company we have. We're grateful for that. But a number of your clients are also our clients. So there'll be opportunities to collaborate on that. So thank you for that. So when we first got up here, they hadn't started the clock, and it was showing 30 minutes. I'm like, we could be up here forever. But we won't be. I know Foteini has a hard stop here, too. So if you think about the next 3 to 5 years, and as soon as I say 5 years, our engineering team looks at me like I have two heads saying, what do you mean 5 years? It's too far out. But if you think about in the next 3 to 5 years, what do companies really need to do to prepare? And I'm going to start with you, Sabrina, on this one.
Yeah, the 3 to 5 year horizon, I think that, Laura said it well, like you can't predict it, but what you do know is that it's going to be more helpful, more human, more multimodal. So I'll give you just a couple of things, because I think we have to start at the individual level, then we think about the work, and then we should think about our communities, right? On the individual level, use the tools, learn the tools, right? So we do this great Grow with Google course called Gen AI Essentials. It's free, there's just a Coursera fee on it. It's the most popular Gen AI course globally, huge demand. So I think everybody getting up to that watermark, I think you're all experts in this room, you're way beyond it, but use it in your day-to-day life. Like last night we were making pancakes and my husband was talking to my mother-in-law in Wales. Hi Jill, if you're watching online. And it turns out in Wales, and they don't actually put in baking powder or baking soda, and we had like a fun little kind of, home argument about what, and I went to my Pixel phone and I started up Gemini Live and we had a conversation about like what are these different baking powders, how do they work, and so on. These are really interesting ways that you're starting to use this in your life, right? Like in your day-to-day, using AI to book a trip, comparing cars, trying to figure out complex situations, writing things. So really using it matters a lot. I think on your job and on your work, there are a lot of use cases that are coming out there. How do you create scale? How do you create value? And how do you accelerate those things at the right pace, right? And how do you actually get them adopted at scale? And I think that's a really, really important thing to do. I'm seeing coders use it. I'm seeing a lot of this in marketing. So for example, there's a flower store in Milton called Karen's Flowers, a small flower store that suddenly realized they wanted to get more clients, and they turned to one of our products called PMax, which is this Gen AI, it's an AI-assisted marketing campaign, and they got 10% more people coming to their store and buying stuff at a 30% higher return on investment. This is really, really good. We're seeing it in call centers. We're seeing it in a lot of different areas. And then I think what excites me most about the next 3 to 5 years is the opportunity to unlock big problems, right? Health, fire detection, all of these different areas, different things in our community. And I'll just tell you one quick story. Google Translate is a really big one for me. My parents are immigrants to Canada. I'm very Canadian. I grew up in that, and I wish my parents had access to Google Translate. And up until a couple years ago, you had about 140 languages on it. In the last little while, we've added 110 different languages thanks to AI. And one of those languages that we added was Inuktitut. This is a language spoken by 39,000 people in the remote area of Canada. And we were able to do that, with AI, but also in partnership with the groups and the elders there to make sure that we got it right, because it's in 2 different formats. It's actually in a format that is Roman characters and then a different character set as well. And just to see the impact on that of a group of 39,000 people, like that really gives me a lot of hope and excitement about the solutions that are to come. I want to see it unlocked in that way in more places.
Thank you for that. Foteini?
So next 3 to 5 years for our businesses, it sounds like, based on the numbers you just shared, they need to catch up with the previous few years. And I would say it's very worthwhile doing so, because the trends we see right now with Gen AI, the shrinking of the models, I think the financials of doing Gen AI at scale are going to make sense. I think these equations are going to close quite nicely, and if you don't use that time right now to get the business strategy in place, identify the areas where you want to focus, then we're always going to keep treating it as a shiny object, do use cases, and paralysis, you called it, exactly it, just stay in that world forever. So if it's productivity, then okay, great, how do you capitalize on that? If it's revenue, like exactly how are you going to go after it? So let's use the time to get very crisp around how we're going to adopt these technologies, embed them in a business, and then prepare employees and prepare your clients as well, and be very transparent and open about your intention to use these tools and change your business. Because you got to bring them with you. Even if I look at the Royal Bank, like as mature as we are today with AI, we still face the dilemma of like, how do we all move at the same speed at our scale, right? And you can't have 70% of the organization running and you're leaving behind 30%. So the patterns, the reuse, the training that is very, so we release mandatory training for all of our employees in AI, Gen AI, just to begin by understanding how they can leverage these technologies in the day-to-day workflow, and then the responsibility they have to provide oversight as they get access to these state-of-the-art tools. And so these are all like foundational work so that we all move forward at the same speed. And I think in every business, you got to be thinking about how you do that. And then how do you talk to your client upfront about your intention? And whoever other stakeholders you may have, depending on where you're operating, whether that's your regulator, your business partners, your collaborator, whatever that may be.
Thank you, Foteini. There's 2 things I want to draw on what you said. By the way, I've loved all of your comments. So one of them was around ROI, even though you didn't use those letters. I would challenge anyone decision-making 25 years ago to tell me what their ROI was in going online. Right? In reality, you just knew you had to do it, and this is no different. So I come out of capital markets, if you go back far enough in my career, and it's what have you done for me lately? But the focus really does need to be on what does the future look like. Now, the second part you talked about was, and all of you have touched on change management. So I would say, without getting into a lot of detail, that it was always, we need more talent, there's a shortage of talent, we need more talent, until about 2 years ago. And all of a sudden we started hearing from our partners, change management, change management, change management. And so ultimately, this is something that's also been very critical. So thank you for that. I will give you, Steve, the last word on this.
Oh, 3 to 5. Okay, so maybe I'll touch on one that we haven't really talked about here in this panel so much yet. And I'm very bullish on 3 to 5 years. I love things we can do on R&D for sustainability purposes. There's so many things that I think we can benefit from. But I think the space that I see really fast movement, at least within our organization, is how do we think about agentic frameworks and leveraging agentic AI. We think it's a big opportunity for us, candidly. And I think it's a powerful one if you think over a 3-year time horizon, because it will really pick at this point of change management. I think the way this will move will be, an agent assisting somebody in terms of what they need to do within our organization. And then I think we'll start to realize that maybe we didn't need the assist, but we needed the agent to sit right alongside the individual and they actually take on tasks that the individual no longer needed to do. And then I think we'll surface opportunities for where it should be just agent only and we don't think about the human. That's a huge change curve to go on, but I think it's the reality of where this is heading for us. So I really feel like that's a massive opportunity for us to think about, and it brings whole new things into the dimension. How do we think about these digital workers and their access controls, what they can and can't do within our ecosystem, how they observe each other, and there's not going to be one winner in this, or we're going to need to use agentic capabilities from many of our partners. How can they observe what each other are doing, understand that was accurate, inaccurate, and how do we kind of work in that ecosystem? So I feel like a huge agenda to tackle around agentic, but it is coming at us fast and furious.
Thank you very much. So Foteini, Sabrina, Steve, I want to say thank you very much for coming today and sharing our time on the panel, and please say thank you to them as well.